Bigfoot Collectors Club with Bryce and Michael. I know a ghost story or two.
I'm so scared.
Yeah.
How did you make my lights turn off at the exact moment that the voice came on?
We barely started and he's already shivering in his sandals. Hey, everybody.
Say what happened to their extra pair of underwear?
We don't wear underwear on this show.
Not on this show.
No.
I read the email, McMills. I read the email.
Yeah, we're full commando. Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bigfoot Collectors Club, the show where we talk to amazing guests about their personal paranormal history and share stories of high strangeness. I'm your host, Michael McMillan. I almost left I was waiting for someone else to say it. I forgot which part of the intro I was in. With me always is your other host,
Bryce Johnson.
And our super producer,
Riley Bray.
There you go.
There we go.
Our guest today is a Broadway performer, singer, dancer, actor, and star of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, playing the role of Josh Chan, the reluctant and lovelorn ex of Rachel Bloom's Rebecca Bunch. He is currently filming season 2 of Insatiable for Netflix. Ladies and gentlemen, please, finally, welcome to the show, Vincent Rodriguez III.
Yay!
All three of you can sit down. It's fine. It's totally fine. But thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, Vinny, welcome to the show.
What up, McMills?
I've been saving you for a very special week, which is this week on Friday is the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend finale.
Wow.
We just got 2 days to. Oh God, I forgot.
Get a Kleenex.
Vinny, you joke, but he is the one who will be. He and Rachel are the first to cry.
Wow.
I mean, we've all cried. We're all gonna miss the show.
Yeah,
we have our big finale on Friday, followed by the live in concert special. So it's a big night for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. I'm so happy to have Josh Chan on the show.
What's up, dude?
For our big finale week for Crazy Ex.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of Crazy Ex fans who listen to the podcast.
Oh, cool.
So I know that they are thrilled that you are finally. I feel like I'm saving Vinny for a big week.
Thanks, McMills.
Yeah, man.
Hey, fans.
So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. This
Yeah,
is so cool.
yeah.
Are you sorry to say sad to say goodbye to the show? I mean, you're already moving on to the next job. It's fine.
That helps. That always helps.
Yeah, that was weird. It was in my goals. Like, I don't know, almost a year ago, I made the goal like, okay, I know this is going to be hard, so I'm going to prepare myself spiritually, mentally, physically for the ending of this era in my life. And so I was been listening to YouTube videos, inspirational videos. I've been transforming my body, and that all kind of.
I have too, but just in the other direction. It's just getting softer.
Stop it. But yeah, all my physical goals kind of translated to like, kind of preparing my mind and my heart, and the show means so much to me. And whenever I'm with the cast and the creatives on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, I feel just like the luckiest guy in the world.
That's great.
Even when we were in the dressing room for the live special, that was magic to me. And something so special, and something that I feel like because of my history doing theater in New York for so long, and doing national tours and regional theater, and being just a little chorus boy for so many years of my career, like I really could appreciate what it meant to be in sharing a dressing room with these amazingly talented dudes.
Yeah, it's such a special show in that way that, like, first of all, you get to see lots of naked men, and that's fun.
That's fun.
But
That's nice.
But it's one of the it is like what other show in Hollywood, like a TV show where you actually do get to kind of cross the threshold into the theater world, like the way that we've been able to on this show.
That's
is
amazing.
So cool. And those
really
live
enjoying
shows at the
those,
Orpheum, then you'll see it Friday night, was so special.
Yeah, they just locked it in, and we got a text in the text chain, and I was like, I just had a moment. I mean, I had already processed a lot of this ahead of time, but I had a moment for them, for like Aline and Kabir, our award-winning editor who helped edit it, and Jack Dolgen, who's one of our writers, directors, executive producers, and Rachel's songwriting partner of like 7 years. And Rachel was just like, I feel like my friend Rebecca is passed away, and I have to mourn her now because that's it. That we're done editing our show, like our baby, our story, and I just had to just take a moment for myself. I mean, I had my own moment. So I don't think I told you this. When you got the 418 script, was it a hard copy or was it like did you get an email and read it?
I got an email. Actually,
Okay.
I actually didn't get it until the table read.
Oh, for 417.
Yeah, for
'cause
417.
417 because
418
418
's the live special.
show. So for 417, I had the script for days, and I had it on my dining table, and I knew I have to read that at some point before we start filming it, so I understand what's happening. And I remember we got home late from filming 416, and my husband had he left that day or that morning, and I was alone, and it was like 9 o'clock at night, and I just I was like, I have to do it. I have to do it tonight. If I don't have time to process this, whatever's going to happen to me, I don't have time to deal with it after tonight.
I can't deal with this right now.
Can't just deal with it. But no, I can't deal with it right now, so I'm going to deal with it right now. So I sat down and I read it, and I read. I'm already a slow reader, but I on purpose reread pages. I on purpose slowed down what I was reading. I on purpose
Really took the time to savor
took
it.
the time to savor it. And then I remember seeing the last line of the show, which was told to me 5 years ago via Skype by Aline Brosh McKenna and Rachel Bloom.
No way.
I remember when they told me how this whole show was going to end, and there it was. And then right after that, I saw it said end of episode, and I was inconsolable for about 10 minutes.
Ah.
I went through waves of emotion and sob and crying that like past lives were coming up, like
Really?
5-year-old. Like I heard a 5-year-old crying. I heard a 10-year-old crying. I heard a kid crying like he lost his mommy.
Really?
And he was like I listened. I'm fairly spiritual, and my watcher in my brain was watching me go through this and letting,
Right.
and then my actual body was just not fighting anything. I was working so hard to just let the wave throw me.
Yeah.
You know, and I did, and it was really cathartic, and it made me realize how much the show means to me and how much all of you guys mean to me and how you're really going to be with me forever. And now the fans are also responding on Instagram because I've posted some, vids and the TV Guide magazine spread that came out.
Oh yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, I'm so honored that Jim Halterman at TV Guide magazine asked me to do it, and he gave me a camera, and he gave me like a Canon camera, and I actually have this camera. I got it in Tokyo, Japan, of all places, like years ago when I was on the Xanadu tour. And but here's like a recent version of it, and I'm like, I know exactly how to use this camera. I used to own one of these, and they were like, take as many photos as you can of the series, of the final episodes, like behind the scenes, what you do, and like how you prepare, like everything, and then we'll pick. But we want it to be specific to this episode and just for us, so that no one else will see these photos except for us. And I'm like, okay, cool. And it was really hard to do.
Yeah.
It was weird.
They're
You're
like
such a-
only
but-
pictures of you.
Bryce,
Like, this is so
it
hard.
started that way.
They're like,
It
why are
started
all
that-
these mirror selfies in here,
But,
Vinny?
Mick Mills.
I mean, you look great with your shirt off, but we're kind of hoping it would branch out beyond your trailer.
Maybe.
I definitely started there for sure.
You're
I was like,
just to warm up.
I'm just gonna get these out of the way. Warm it
I'm gonna
up.
slide these up front.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's so great that I was telling the guys before we started that you did take a lot of some of my favorite photos of the show, and you're all like, I'm so bad at remembering to take pictures, and so it's always great to. It's always good if you have someone in the team that's just like, yeah, I got it all, like I got it totally covered, and then you're like, thank God someone took these pictures
Totally.
because we do. Once it's done, you want them,
You will treasure them.
Right.
So
Did you see get the email about the rap gift?
I did, yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
1,700 photos
Wow.
from
Oh, I
my
thought you were
iPhone.
going to say
Amazing.
dollars.
Yeah.
Like, what? Are
Vinny,
you serious?
thank you. That will go a long way in my unemployment now that.
$1,700.
Everyone, here is your rap gift, $1,700.
So I want to talk about your personal paranormal history, and before we get into it, I want to touch on something that you said about being spiritual and that watcher in the brain watching. When you have a moment like that, and I think we all have had those emotional moments where you're almost like you're so in your body, but at the same time you're outside of yourself, kind of looking in. You know what I mean? What do you think in a spiritual sense is happening in an emotional moment like that? When you say you're connecting with past lives or past selves, or maybe yourself at a younger moment in your life, like if you're using your imagination, what do you think is actually happening in that moment if you had to analyze it?
I don't want to. I mean,
Mike's like, define consciousness.
Yeah, define God.
well,
yeah. You're in the right place.
and 5 minutes later, he passed out. I think it reminds me of, if any of you have seen Captain Marvel,
I have.
there's a scene where she is remembering, and it's in the commercial, where she is remembering her past, and we had seen clips of this character's history of childhood and adulthood and going through these struggles in their life. And and this ties into one of my favorite things about Marvel or about comic books in general. And
We are big comic book nerds on this podcast,
well,
so you're
I
in a good
mean,
spot.
dude, like with great power comes great responsibility. And I remember when I saw that Spider-Man movie, I remember where I was, and I remember how hard it hit me because I realized this movie wasn't about like a web-slinging kid with powers getting bitten by a spider. This was about like, these were like the powerful stories of how it's like reading like for some, like the Bible. It's like you're learning all this morale, and it's like the 10 Commandments. You're learning like, don't be a douchebag. Honor thy neighbor. And then in this case, it's like, well, you're a young kid and you're not ready for this power, but you have it now. With great power comes great responsibility, and with responsibility comes great power. So along those lines, watching Captain Marvel recall all these moments in their life that were like struggles, and then in this one moment in the movie, all we see is those moments. We go back to those moments, but it's the moments she stood up,
Right.
that she got back up, and they played back each of those time periods, that character standing up, and that just shook me.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way I can describe it, is where it's like,
Well, it's almost like all those moments that you go through in your life where you feel like you've struggled.
Yep.
And then you have this moment where a profound emotional moment, a profound, and in this case, I think was a profound accomplishment here. You're finishing your work on this character, or finishing any work, is a profound accomplishment. It almost seems to tie back to all those moments in our lives where we did struggle, or where we worked really hard, and it's that payoff of like, man, I ran all those miles, but now I did, I did it.
And this is the culmination of that, is like this moment. So for me, it was like that's where the sobbing was coming from. It was a morning of, this is the end, but also like, for me personally, like all this like emotional baggage or stuff I hadn't processed yet, and now all that came up because there's the lid's off, so now it's just like boiling point, no splash guard, bro.
Yeah.
It's
You're like,
just
we're just gonna let this boil over right now,
like right now. So in that way, that's the best way I can describe it, because I just remembered being kind of in just disarray. I like consciousness. I was only so conscious about it. But yeah.
But those are the moments you got to let go. You just kind of have to let go and let yourself feel and let yourself experience those. I think too often we're trying to be like, don't cry, don't do this, don't,
Control.
Control it. To be able to just like feel something and let something channel through you, I think is like, this is a really important thing to have, because now you're able to like recognize that as a moment. And I think oftentimes when we finish things or end things or go through even good things, we often don't take the moment to acknowledge that happened, or that this good or bad. Don't you think?
Well, I was just thinking that like I never finish things, so I can never get to those emotional points. I'm like, that explains a lot, actually. Yeah,
that's not true.
I'm ruminating on a lot. Yeah, I got to finish things.
You finish a podcast episode every week.
Yeah, that's true.
And we always spend 5 minutes in the car crying afterwards,
That's
so
very
it's
true.
fine. The other thing that I really liked that you said earlier, Vinny, was, and that's been kind of a theme, we've been really kind of talking about like the occult and magic a little bit here lately on the podcast.
I'm a magician. Does that count?
Yeah, in a sense, absolutely. But the idea of going, I set a goal, I'm doing this, and to reach that really is in itself an act of magic, in the sense that you're looking out into the universe and you're saying, I'm going to will something that is unmanifested into the physical manifest.
For sure.
Yep.
And that is when we talk about magic, when we talk about, magic with a K, magic, chaos magic or spiritualism or whatever, being able to do that is to be able to accomplish that goal, something that is an idea that doesn't exist, whether it's like, I want to get this job, or I want to like get into shape, or I want, whatever it is, I have this goal that I'm setting for myself. That is like the will of the magician in a sense, and that's I love that. And so this has turned out to be a secretly motivational episode, and I'm digging it.
Yeah,
But
but that's what's funny is that I think there is like kind of a connection to it because there's people can focus on what they choose to focus on, but what we're talking about is like your ability to actually think of something and then actually make it real. And as a magician, because we were just talking about it today at brunch, because they were talking about this magician. Who's awesome.
Magician's brunch?
Magician's brunch. McMills, didn't I tell you?
Why haven't I been invited to Magician's brunch?
No, different magic.
You didn't get the group text. Oh, sorry. I'll check that.
I must not be on that thread.
But we were talking about a magician, and they were complimenting his ability to do this really cool effect, and how once you thought it was it was done a certain way, he would do something that would lead you to believe there was no way he could do it that way. In that way that you're thinking, and I'm just smiling, nodding my head very calmly, going, "That's our job." Like as a magician,
totally.
I have to. I know what the end result is, and then if I don't know how to do it, I start with the end, and then I work backwards. And then if I don't like the end, or if I want to punch the end, I imagine this is what writing is like. Because to me, writing is the best magic. You take a blank page, and you create a world. In one page, you can create a universe. Like Star Trek was a blank page, and then they created Spock, or like the Starship Enterprise. Someone described it on a paper, and then some dude doodled it.
Yeah.
Then like, bam, done. So as a magician, like, oh, I know that ending. That's cool. But you know what else would be cool? If I did this 3 more times, 3 different ways, and then they lost their shit, and then I did this. How did I do that? And I start at the end and I work backwards.
Right.
And then I literally plot and plan it like a script or like a joke.
Right.
1, 2, 3. That's how I set it up. So like some of my coolest magic effects when I'm performing for people and I got a deck of cards, it's some of it is by accident because it's off the cuff or there was a mistake and I have to cover it. But there are some effects that like, no, you guys, this is plotted. Like this is where you think I've messed up, and actually, that's
also that's theater, that's improv, that's life. Like you fumble your way through it sometimes, and it doesn't matter. It's just how you land it. You know what I mean? If it works, it works. Even if you kind of fuck up on your way there, you know what I mean? If you pull off the trick, you pull off the trick. It doesn't matter how you do it. You know, I like this. In terms of working backwards, would you say that if I wanted to be in a Star Wars film but didn't know how to get there, I should just go to set, right?
Yeah.
I should just show up on set.
You literally knock on the
go
door
there
in a Jedi costume.
Okay, cool.
And your makeup case.
Yeah, and I'll figure out how I got there and how I got that role.
Did I
right?
ever tell you about the time I gave myself the role of Anakin Skywalker high on mushrooms?
Yeah, I think you did, but we should hear it again. We need to hear this again because I don't know if it was on the other side or if it was on the main feed.
Rice, go.
Yeah, so
go,
I was doing mushrooms with my best friend Johnny in our apartment, and I had just gotten back from the audition not too long ago for Anakin Skywalker. It was in a hotel room. There was no script. And all they did was like, tell us about your childhood.
And ask you to take your clothes off?
No, so I immediately ripped him off. And I told the story. I told the lady the story about how always in a wishing well, because I loved doing wishing wells, I would always wish for like a real lightsaber. Yeah. And anyway, but so I was doing mushrooms in my apartment.
First of all,
that transition was the best.
First of all, I like that you were visiting wishing wells on a frequent basis, and then always wishing for a lightsaber. Yeah. Like, I love that the magical antique relic is going to give you some futuristic style while still set in the past.
Me and my older brother would always have lightsaber fights, and usually they were with the wrapping paper with just that cardboard tube.
Yes,
and so I was like, I wanted a real one to strike my brother down.
Sounds like Anakin.
Yeah, very Anakin
like the Empire.
Yeah,
but so I'm in my apartment, high on mushrooms, and I remember just looking at my friend. I go, you know what? And he's like, what? I just gave myself the part. Just now. I'm Anakin Skywalker. And he's like, dude, congratulations. But I was like, I swear to God, I felt the emotions of actually having it. And for me, I got to experience like what it was like to have actually gotten the part. Cause like I was totally emotionally invested. I believed it on a fucking physical level. And I was like, dude, I'm Anakin. He was like, yes, dude, you were so good in that role. And I was like, what? Woo! And then I, sobered up and I was like, fuck, I wonder if I'll get that. But for a minute there, I actually had it. It was pretty sweet.
That is that thing we're talking about, though. It's the peak moment. Like you have to allow yourself the peaks. It's not always not always analysis time.
No.
You have the peak, and then you can digest it later.
Yeah.
The irony is that, oh God, this is going to sound so geeky, but this is the time to do it, right? Okay, so I actually believe in that to a certain degree.
Oh,
That's-
sure.
That's actually how I got here.
Yeah.
Like some people like, so how did you, like, dare we get this, McMills? So yeah, how'd you get it? And you're like, I auditioned.
Yeah.
But I don't know what they expect you to say.
Well, there's no one way, right? I mean, that's
You know?
the thing. If there was a way in the creative industry, like I don't know, whatever that fucking but like for artists, musicians, actors, so like if there was, well, you do X, Y, Z, and then you get the part, then everyone would be doing it.
Right.
Everyone would be
Magic.
successful.
The answer's magic.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is taking a certain amount of willpower and willing the I was just having this conversation last night about just sort of being like, I tend to think the more specific you are about wanting something and wanting a certain role, or if it is, look, there's no guarantees to this stuff, but I do think that, I remember before I was on True Blood, it was like I had a narrow miss getting cast on 6 Feet Under when I first moved out here and had read for Alan Ball, and then Ben Foster got the part, and then 5 years passed, and during those 5 years, when anyone would ask me, okay, well, what do you want to do? What's the job you want? I would say I want to be on an HBO show created by Alan Ball, because I loved 6 Feet Under, and I was like, I remember wanting that role so badly, missing it, getting over it, and then moving on, but just having like, okay, I didn't get this one, but I'll get one. And then it was a random thing. My friend had randomly sent me the breakdowns that day, and I had seen on the breakdowns the role for Steve Newland on True Blood, and it was like, it's going to be a small part in season 1, but a large recurring in season 2. And I remember going, that's it. That's the one.
Bullshit,
and it was like yesterday's breakdowns,
Yeah.
And I called my manager and I said, I got to go in for this. And she's like, okay, well, I know they're seeing people already. Let me call casting. Casting's like, no, he's not right for it. And she's like, I'm getting a little pushback. I go, this is it. I've got to audition for this one.
That's wild.
And it was even like I was like 20,
Gotta fight,
I was
man.
like 29, maybe 30 at the time, and they were like looking for someone in their 40s. So I knew, but I was like, I was like, I gotta get in this room.
Yep.
And so my managers and agents pushed. I came in. Everyone was kind of older than me. I came in, I read it, and Alan Ball was like, okay, do it again. I really like that. Just do it again and smile the whole time. And I did that, and he was like, great. And it was one of those where I had prepped for it by reading the chapters in the book. So I recognized the scene from the chapter in the book it was from. And I was just all quietly, I wasn't wearing any of that on my sleeve. I was just like, I'm going to prep for this.
Yeah.
And I remember like going for a hike after that and sitting and meditating like near Griffith Park. And I was like, that is my role. I'm going to get it. And I walked down the hill and I got in my car. And as soon as I got in my car, I got a phone call and they're like, it's yours.
Wow,
you got the part.
that's amazing.
Fuck.
And it was one of those, look, that does not happen all the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen all the time,
that.
obviously. But
Right.
it was one of those where I think I do honestly believe that specific intention and when I could go, this is what I want, this is what I want to do,
Right.
at the very least kind of lined me up to notice in the breakdown that part when nobody else had for me. And I was like, that's it. That's the thing I've been asking for. This is my opportunity,
It takes that, though. That's the thing that, because what you were saying is that that moment you were describing so awesomely. It
When
was
I was
so
Anakin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were Anakin, Bryce, it's so funny.
Great
but-
job, by the way.
Great job.
In the parallel universe where you're in Attack of the Clones. By the way, I would like to say you would have been a better choice, but
Well, I was about to talk about the shadow side of the law of manifestation.
dude, I've been so into the shadow self shit right now by Carl Jung.
Yeah.
Like the whole dude, I am so into this right now.
You would be remiss not to talk about what can happen is like, it works both ways really. The universe doesn't have doesn't really consist of good or bad. It's just, it's positive and negative forces. And so I can go through moments in my life where I can be really depressed or something, and I can get really, and I'm very aware of the powers of manifestation, and it seems to be sometimes a downward spiral. Is like you get this anxiety, you're like, and all you can see is your future, like broke and out and scared, and you really be like, and the crappy thing about that is you're like, God, am I like manifesting this future for myself right now? And it's a terribly it can become a really dark place because you so often think about, and it feels so real to you. Like, for instance, especially as actors, you're like, I'll never work again. I'm going to go broke. I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose that. And then it becomes so real to you. And then you have to really do the work to try and pull yourself out of it because listen, you're like, God, I'm aware that I can manifest good things in my life. So I have to be really careful about not manifesting this shadow side to these things as well.
Well, so two things come to mind. One's comic book related, which is with great power comes great responsibility. So if you are the one in charge of your life and of your creativity,
which you are,
that you are, so you can choose a different thought. How it affects you, that's the thing. Is that, and then it goes back to whatever your belief is on mental technology. So your emotions are chemicals. Like when you're happy, that's dopamine or endorphins or what have you. And then it's the idea of, are those thoughts you're having, are those you? And if they're not you, who is you? Yeah. Which is why I said watcher. So I've been listening to Michael Beckwith and Wayne Dyer. So, and then they bring up the idea that when you have negative thoughts, they're like, well, because there's this belief that like your thoughts are you, or more specifically, if any of you prescribe to messages from the universe or notes from the universe, it's thoughts become things. Choose the good ones. What I love about that, it's thoughts become things, not you are the thoughts. Mm-hmm. So I come from a place, and this is shared by others, but like my thoughts aren't me. They're just things that happen because we're alive and we're afraid. So when you're afraid, it spirals. More negative thoughts happen. Have they happened yet? No. Are you the fortune teller and those are going to happen? No. Those are just ideas that you created in your head. So what are they? And so I like to think of them as the easiest way to describe them are like clouds. They pass through and they go, you can't stop the cloud from being there, but just let it pass. Like, oh, that's a negative thought. Whoa, that's really scary. This is a dark storm in front of me. That's scary. But they're clouds and they pass. Now, if you're looking at the clouds and those are the thoughts you're having, then who are you? And that's, you're the watcher. So by defining it in that way, now it's like, well, then my thoughts, then all that darkness I just thought of, those aren't me. Those are just ideas I had, and that'd make a great comic book. I can write it down. You know what I mean? That's where I think people get their sources of stories and why we have really cool, I assume like people who have written great screenplays or plays or movies or TV shows wrote things in a very dark place, like Breaking Bad or even Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And it's just, I think that's a healthy way of looking at it and kind of keeping in mind how you define yourself and your ability to compartmentalize or separate yourself from the dark thoughts you're having or the happy thoughts you're having. And remember, like, because even happy thoughts, like, they pass. Like, nothing lasts forever. What is that? Avenue Q, Bobby Lopez. Everything in life is only for now. And except for death and paying taxes, everything in life is only for now. Yeah. Life may be scary, but it's only temporary.
That's great.
So it's like, so that's kind of how I keep my mind in check and differentiate things. But I think there is, I don't know if you want to call it paranormal, but there is something kind of magical about that idea. Like, wait a minute, did I do that? And I think, and when you're saying, McMills, about how, well, you put in the work, I put in the work, you're a co-creator,
right,
in your life. So, because people say like, oh, it's like talent and then luck. Well, the talent's you. The luck is something else that we can't grab.
I've always defined luck as preparation meeting opportunity.
That's good.
Well, the preparation, but that's great. So, Bryce, preparation is us. Opportunity is like happenstance, or McMills seeing the breakdown, me meeting a trainer who train superheroes.
Yeah, right.
And then going, I want to be one. And then a year and a half later, I'm on page 32 of Muscle Fitness magazine and I'm kicking my face.
Yeah.
And it's like, what?
You're much closer to being cast as a superhero than you would be if you didn't put in all that work.
Right. But in the beginning, but I'll tell you, man, years ago, I wouldn't have believed you for a second that was possible. It would have been like a pipe dream. And then, but now it's like, oh, so I can't necessarily make it happen, but I can do what I can to like see if it's possible.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And then some of these other opportunities arose, and you know, I'm not starring in anything. I'm not an action superstar or anything right now, but I'll tell you this: I've met a lot of people who choreograph for action movies. I've met stuntmen, I've met action actors, I've met trainers, I've met tactical military specialists, and I'm working with all of them right now.
You're basically a one-man army now.
Yeah, and
you're a killing machine.
Well, I'm teaching. And I just danced in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and
by the way, if you guys have not seen Vinny dance, he can go from
light on his feet.
Oh man, he can go from a graceful Gene Kelly dance straight into like a martial arts display like you would not believe.
Nunchucks
the dude is
included.
I mean, you've always had whatever this talent is. You've always clearly had it in you, because even if you weren't superhero built, you were still as graceful as a superhero, and you still had those moves. So.
Right. But that was the irony, is that I had all those in my wheelhouse, but I never had the body to kind of match it until like when I did Fit Hot Guys last season.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's like, oh, my waist is small, and like
nothing gets actors into faster shape than being told they have a shirtless scene or a song and dance number where they talk about how fit and hot they are. Because I remember all three of you. Well, David Hull, I don't know as much, but like Scott, and I know Scott was like, I'm not eating this, and this for like a month.
Yeah, dude, it was rough. And then for me, because they got to be in underwear because their characters were stripping down from pedestrian clothing. Me, my character Josh was a go-go boy. So Aline was like, how do you feel about being in a Speedo dancing on a box?
Yeah.
And I went, are you referring to those 3 months I spent in P-Town in Take Me Out? She was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I was a go-go boy in Provincetown, Massachusetts while I was doing the play Take Me Out. She was like, I had no idea that was the case. I was like, well,
you were
just
in the play
wrote...
Take Me Out?
Yeah.
I was in the play Take Me Out.
Cool.
Wait a minute, do you guys know each other?
Wait, take your pants off.
Oh,
Bryce Johnson!
Oh my God!
Oh, Johnson. We called you Bryce Johnson, the Johnson.
I wish that was the case.
Me too.
That is wild. I wonder if we're in the. That's weird. We'll have to talk about that later.
I played Takeshi Kawabata. So art imitates life. And then when Aline had me do the bartending thing, I was like, well, I'm a bartender. Like, but can you do flair? I'm like, how long do I have? She was like, 2 weeks. I'm like, I'll learn it.
Wow.
And I did.
Great.
But so I mean, gosh,
I think we could all use a little bit of your willpower, Vinny.
Yeah.
I am constantly impressed.
I got a shirtless scene, and I was like, I'm just going to do hydroxycut. I got.
We had a hot tub scene together.
Oh yeah, that's
in
right.
Major Crimes.
Oh yeah,
you look good in like a G-string.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. Oh yeah, remember I wanted to walk out naked. I was like, let me do a take where I just walk out with nothing on.
And then
okay,
pixelize that.
Yeah, but I remember I took hydroxycut for like 3 weeks.
He's got a nice ass.
I got really aggro, and it made me almost crap myself on set. But that's a different story.
Again, another piece from Bryce's history. All right, this is such a great. I love all this, and I think this is a great. Your ass is a great moment to.
Thank you.
We're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for Bullshit or Believe It with our guest.
Can't wait,
Vinny Rodriguez.
Woo!
Okay, Vinny, it's time for Bullshit
or Believe It. Nice. We just worked that one out.
This is a rapid fire game where I'm going to go down a list of different paranormal subjects, and you're gonna. Some of these you're going to feel a little in between on, but you have to choose Believe It if you're open to it, or Bullshit if you're not.
Roger that.
Okay. On your mark, get set, ghosts. Ghosts.
Believe it.
UFOs.
Believe it.
Bigfoot.
Believe it.
Angels.
Believe it.
Gnomes.
Bullshit.
Fairies.
Bullshit.
Unicorns.
Bullshit.
Loch Ness Monster.
Believe it.
Little gray aliens.
Believe it.
Dogman.
Bullshit.
Parallel universes.
Believe it.
Shapeshifters.
Oh.
Your face is doing it right now.
Shapeshifters? Oh, man. Bullshit.
Mermaids.
Bullshit.
Heaven.
Believe it.
Hell.
Believe it.
Dragons.
Believe it.
Yeti.
Believe it.
Elves.
Bullshit.
ESP.
Is that like the channel or like the
ESPN?
I have ESP3.
Believe it. Well, actually, right after these messages from our sponsors, ESP is
Psychic powers.
Extrasensory perception.
Psychic powers. Believe it.
Chupacabra.
I mean, I can't pronounce it, so bullshit.
Demons.
Believe it.
Atlantis.
Believe it.
Life on other planets.
Believe it.
World peace.
Believe it.
Peace in the multiverse.
Believe it.
All right. Not
Nice.
bad.
Well
Like
done.
pretty well.
Well done.
Yeah. I feel like mythological creatures, not so much. Some
Yeah.
of the more
I
paranormal
feel
stuff,
like
pretty much.
Gnomes, elves, and fairies is just getting a bad rap
Yeah.
from us
I
Americans.
should break them up.
I think what's funny about all this too, because after we just had this talk, it makes me think of like science and like history and like what fossils we found and like how
The unicorn fossil.
because you could
Yeah,
see
the dragon fossil.
the dragon
Dinosaurs.
fossil. Well, dinosaurs, yeah, because it's like you see something that's real, and then you can like interpret it. But then they've shown us like that there's that one lizard that is the closest to looking like a dinosaur, and they've shown photos of it, and it straight up looks like a small dinosaur, and you're like, what the? And they're like, oh, it's just this, and you're like, well, some dude like. That's real.
Could have seen that.
So could have seen that, blown it up or whatever. But like, I also feel like
Sometimes I wonder if some dinosaurs lived into the Middle Ages and then knights fought dinosaurs and called them dragons.
yeah. Well, that's
Yeah, that didn't happen.
No, I like to think that it did.
Birds are still around.
cool.
Those are the
Yeah,
closest
birds are
dinosaurs.
relatives.
but
to dinosaurs.
that's the thing about like time and like evolution and sorry, I'm big into like these motivational dudes. So like Jim Quick talks about how there was a moment where a period of time where people thought you could not run the mile in less than 5 minutes.
Roger Bannister, the 4-minute mile.
If you did it in less than 5 minutes, your heart would explode. So for a very long time,
Holy shit! It's like a jogger's version of speed.
but like that belief was so ingrained in us. And then there was a dude who thought, well, what? I'm going to do it in 4 minutes and
3 minutes, 59 seconds.
Oh, so it's the 4-minute mile.
4-minute mile.
Jim Quick says something like, I might be misquoting, but he was recalling the story and someone asked him, how did you do that? And then what's his name? The guy who did it?
Roger Bannister.
Roger Bannister. Roger said, when I would jog, and when I was jogging, I just imagined that by the time I hit the finish line, it wouldn't be 4 minutes. It'd just be shy by like 2 seconds. So he used his brain and he was telling his body like, I'm going to do this. And I'm sure it didn't happen overnight, but like, that's how we evolve. Like we get better, we get stronger. Like, we figure shit out.
The
And,
incredible thing about that story is once he did it, then it just became a normal thing. People started breaking the 4-minute mile all the time. So
yeah, which is why naysayers, fuck them. Because that's the other thing too, is that like we're our own worst critic, and that's why it's for me it's like really thrilling to be around creative people, like especially writers, because I think because for me it's so daunting to be on an empty stage and someone say, dance for me, or like
dance for me.
or create.
That happens to me all the time.
Dance for me, Riley.
Or well, it's like you tell a writer like create a universe for me. What? It's like, oh, we'll create a 2-person scene for me. Or for a singer, when people put you on the spot, like, oh, you're a singer, sing something, and then you're blank.
Yeah, I never.
To me,
do
it's
it.
that same thing. So it's like,
Yeah.
but writers, like, you start off with a blank page, and like now you have like 4 seasons of. You don't have 4 seasons of something, but you create a story, you create these characters, you create a world, and I think that's magical to the ability to create other worlds. But it's like if you turn it on yourself, you can like create whatever you want for yourself, man.
When we come back, it's time for this week's story of high strangeness.
Woo.
Get ready.
Get ready, y'all.
You're about to shit your pants.
Oh no, let me change my underwear.
Cut.
This episode is sponsored.
I'm not wearing underwear. Oh no. Oh no. All right, it's time for this week's story of high strangeness, and this is one that I discovered when we were rehearsing for this Friday's finale of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's really us singing. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend live in concert special. I was flipping through Twitter on a 5-minute break, and I'd seen Greg Newkirk had retweeted a photo of this entity and called him, someone had called him the Napoleon Dynamite of aliens, which is fascinating.
Ooh, that's
yeah, not my words. It was founded on Twitter, but I had to immediately. There was there was a drawing of this alien, and there was a signature next to it that said Carl Higdon. And so I Googled that, and I discovered one of the greatest stories of high strangeness I think we have ever covered thus far on the show. This is the story of Ausso 1. Now, the story of Ausso 1 is really the story of Carl Higdon. On October 25th, 1975, Carl was a 41-year-old oil drilling foreman living in the rural town of Rawlins, Wyoming. So you want to picture this area. I'm picturing this sort of like time and setting of Brokeback Mountain. It's that super big country.
God's country.
Old God's country.
Yeah.
Small town.
Yeah.
Oil drillers, cowmen, like woodsmen.
Nature.
Totally.
Open.
This role could have totally been played by Heath Ledger, 100%. You know, and in the 1970s, in the mid-70s, a recession had hit, and Carl was husband and father of, I believe, 7 kids, and he was working very hard to put food on the table, and oftentimes one of the ways he would do that is the way many woodsmen do, is go out and he'd hunt. So Carl was supposed to report to work that day, but when one of his best employees and site leaders called in sick, he decided they should all take the day off because what he wanted to get done wasn't going to happen. So instead, Carl Higdon got in his truck and he headed out to hunt for elk in his favorite hunting grounds in McCarthy Canyon. Now, on his way there, he pulled over to help a couple stranded motorists and help them fix their truck. This is the kind of guy who Carl was, very level, old school, steady hand, like old Paul Newman type, really. And he helped the guys fix his truck, and the 2 men were also hunters, and when they heard that Carl was on his way to shoot elk, the motorist told him to go head in 40 miles south of Rawlins instead, deep into the forests of Medicine Bow National Park, because they had just come from there, and that's where all the elk were grazing. So Carl thanked the men, he got back in his truck, and he headed to the location where the men said the elk were located. Stepping softly through the freshly fallen snow, Carl cradled his rifle through the woods when something moved out of the corner of his eye. Out into the clearing walked a herd of 5 elk. Carl raised his rifle to take a shot at one of the large bucks, or bulls I believe they're called, and he fired. But the rifle made no sound. In fact, all the sounds of the forest seemed to fall silent, and time slowed down as Carl watched in awe as the bullet slowly emerged from the gun and rippled through what he would later describe as invisible jello. The bullet traveled in slow motion for about 50 feet and then fluttered to the ground like a dying butterfly. The woods, still eerily silent, surrounded Carl as he walked over to the bullet, picked it up from the ground, and discovered it was now a strange, twisted, misshapen piece of metal. The casing looked like it had been turned inside out, and the lead slug from the bullet casing had simply vanished. Carl described that moment in the woods. It's one of those feelings when there's a A thunderstorm is about to happen, and the air is full of eerie stillness and static electricity. And as he's holding the casing, he hears a twig snap behind him. He turns around, pocketing the bullet casing in his jacket, and out from the trees steps a figure. It was a man, but one unlike Carl had ever seen. He was about 6 feet tall. Carl judged him to be around 180 pounds, dressed in a black bodysuit that Carl said was similar to wetsuits worn by scuba divers. This figure had two bandolier-like straps crisscrossed across his chest and a black belt that was wrapped around his waist, and the buckle was a bright yellow multi-pointed star, a lot like Captain Marvel's insignia. This figure had small, dark eyes with blonde, bristly hair that stuck straight up like straw. His skin was jaundiced, and he had no chin. He had a thin mouth where his head and neck met, exposing 2 rows of 3 large, square teeth. 2 other things jumped out about this humanoid. He had antennae protruding out of his forehead.
That'll do it.
And where his right hand should have been, the figure had a cone-shaped appendage. And in the drawings, it appears to have no left hand at all. Now I'm going to show you a picture of this entity, a drawing. If you can see here, I printed them out, but I left them at home. I'll show it to you in a sec, Riley. This figure stepped out. This is a strange... Kind of looks like Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah.
All of this will be up on our Instagram, so you can go look at these illustrations. Check it out, Riley.
Yeah, that dude rules.
He kind of looks like Drogon or Dargon from Insector or the Sectors. If you ever played with that action figure as a kid.
Nope.
In the 80s, I did. I was a weird kid who liked bug action figures. The being spoke to Carl in a friendly voice, saying simply, "How you doing?" Carl, his mind stuttering, his body shaking, said, "Fine, I guess." The being asked him, "Are you hungry?" At which point, this entity produced a cellophane-like packet, which he then telepathically sent over. It hovered in the air over to Carl.
Please be tots.
Tater tots. Sent him a
cellophane, Riley.
Would
not be Todd's.
And in the packet were 3 pills. The being told him that one of these pills will keep you full for 3 days. Unsure as to why he did this, Carl opened the package and swallowed one of the pills.
Bad idea.
And then looked over and noticed that near this strange figure was a tall, clear cube standing in the clearing. Carl remarked later that this cube looked like a large Christmas package. And the stranger asked, he said it was about 5 feet tall, 7 feet long, 4 feet wide. It's not huge, but I mean big if it were a Christmas gift. The stranger asked, "Would you like to come with me?" Carl simply shrugged yes.
Yeah, I'm not doing anything until later, so yeah.
The next thing Carl Hignan knew, he was sitting in a bucket seat in a row of similar seats inside of this glass box. But the interior of what was clearly now a craft was much larger on the inside than it appeared on the outside. In one of his theories, Carl later said that he thought that maybe that they must have shrunk themselves down inside of this thing, somehow made their bodies smaller. I tend to imagine that maybe there's some sort of dimensional rift inside this cube where once you walk in, it's much larger inside. Some stories that you find online to compare to the TARDIS, the telephone booth in Doctor Who. So Carl looked over and he saw that not only he, but all 5 elk were in the craft as well, frozen still, as if paused in time, contained in what he thought was some type of invisible field. And there was another humanoid that appeared as like the first one. They strapped Carl into his seat by his wrist and placed a helmet over his head. Carl said that he felt like he was Frankenstein's monster. The first being...
I just got a visual of like the 5 elk sitting up in the... doing the camera on that black elk.
Oh, God. What the fuck? I can't move, dude. Help me. I mean, as our listeners know, I've been watching a lot of Twin Peaks, and this just reminds me of one of these episodes that Dale Cooper has, like in the Black Lodge or something.
Totally,
it's this so otherworldly, other-dimensional moment. And the first being, who called himself Ausso 1, he pointed at a console where there were 3 dissimilar levers, and he gestured at one with his drill bit-like hand, and the lever moved, and suddenly the craft was lifting up into the air.
Sure.
And Carl said that he could see out of the glass cube, and they hovered over his truck, about 50 feet above his truck, where his truck was parked. And he watched as Ausso 1 pointed at the truck, and it simply vanished. And the next thing Carl was aware of is that the craft was floating in deep space, hovering over a giant shape he described that resembled a basketball. Now, this is important. He's described a box as being a large Christmas package, and now he's describing what he realized was a planet. This giant sphere is looking like a basketball. Mm-hmm. This is not a man who has, I would say, a super vivid imagination. He's bringing up basic sort of shapes.
Yeah.
He's not a dumb guy at all.
Right.
But he's not... This is just important to think about. The metaphors he's using are very simple.
Yeah.
It's a Christmas box. It's a basketball.
Yeah.
And I think that's important when we think about whether or not this guy makes up this story. So they're floating over this planet, and but it's not one that Carl has ever been to. He said the craft descended upon this strange world, which also claimed was his home planet, located 163,000 light miles from Earth, not light years. And Carl would later say, that made me think that their relation to time and space is maybe different than ours. The ship approached a landing pad at the base of a giant luminous tower that was beaming with giant multicolored lights. And he described this thing, and there were other towers off in the distance. He said they kind of all looked like the Space Needle. And they had these bright lights that were so blinding for him to look at that he had to close his eyes. And after a while, he was begging them to do something about the bright light because it was hurting his eyes. And also one said, almost jokingly, it was like, yeah, well, your sun burns us too, hurts us too, which he thought was like a really weird thing to say. So the craft lands.
Turn down your sun first.
Yeah, why don't you? And through the transparent walls of the cube, Carl was stunned to see that 4 other humans dressed in everyday clothing were standing out on the platform, including what looked to be a blonde 11-year-old girl. And Carl noticed that none of them seemed to be alarmed or in distress. It was almost like you get the impression that they were there already.
Weird.
So Ausso 1 and the other entity take Carl out of the ship, and they lead him across the platform, and they put him on this like pedestal thing. And as he was standing there, he said that, and he noticed that when they moved, that Ausso and the other entity seemed to just glide across the ground and not really walk. So this translucent shield comes out of a wall, and Carl's just staring at this thing, and it seems to scan his body for upwards of like 5 minutes. And he knows it's some sort of... he just instinctively is like, this is some sort of mechanical scanner. And once the procedure is done, Ausso 1 turned to Carl and told him that the 41-year-old oil man did not suit their purpose, and that he would be returned. So Carl was taken back into the cube, and the last thing that he noticed before... 2 things happened. First, when they're back in the cube, Ausso picked up his rifle and talked about how what such a primitive weapon it was. And he said, I would like to keep this weapon, but I wouldn't be allowed to keep this.
And then he showed him his cone hand.
Yeah, this really gets And the last thing that Carl really registered before he blacks out is that all 5 elk are gone. They've been removed from the craft.
That's good.
So, Carl wakes up back in the woods. 2.5 hours have passed. He's standing at the edge of a rocky ravine, and as he comes to, he loses his balance and he stumbles down a 9-foot ravine, hitting his shoulder and his head. And it's cold out. He is completely disoriented. He is amnesiac. He can't remember who he is, where he is, what he's doing in the woods. And he just starts walking down a dirt road for hours, for miles, and finally stumbles upon his truck, which he says at the time he didn't even realize was his own truck. He just saw that there was a CB radio in it. Now the truck is banked in this muddy bog in the middle of the woods.
Different location.
Completely different location, off the road. And later, when the sheriff's men came out, because obviously he's eventually rescued, they are like, how the fuck did this guy drive his truck in? There was no roads into the it was like it was impenetrable. They said it was as if it was dropped out of the sky.
Dude.
Jesus, dude.
So Carl gets in, and on the CB radio he starts making calls, and he finally gets a hold of somebody, and I think the sheriff station or somebody, another truck driver. But what he didn't know, that help was already on the way, because back home, his wife Marjorie, it's 8 o'clock now, it's gotten dark. She's scared that Carl has not come home.
Yeah.
She calls the sheriff. Remember, it's a small town, everybody kind of knows each other.
Of course.
And she calls the sheriff. She says, Carl's not home yet. I'm worried. Can you send out? We need to go out and look for him. So the sheriff agrees to get a small posse together. Marjorie brings a friend, and they're driving out. And remember, they think that he's gone to go hunting in McCarthy Canyon.
Right.
They don't know that he's in this Medicine Bow National Park. So he's in a completely different location than where he usually hunts. And it's not, and so they're searching for him, and as they're driving around, Marjorie and her friend see the light fill with strange lights in the sky, and at one point they say it's as if the sun's coming up, and they're like, well, wait, it's not even midnight yet. Why would the sun be coming up? And these strange lights in the sky were corroborated later by 2 other citizens of Rawlins who said their names were Don and Marilyn James, who witnessed unusual lights emanating in the skies over Medicine Bow Forest during the same time Marjorie and the sheriff's posse were looking for Carl. So finally, through the CB radio, they find out where Carl is. They locate his truck. Everyone is like, how the fuck did he get here? Carl is freaked out. He doesn't know who anybody is. He doesn't know who his wife is. And they coax him out of the truck. And his wife says that when they were on their way and they were taking him to Carbon County Medical Hospital in Rawlins, he kept saying in a sing-songy voice, "They took my elk. They took my elk." And he acted as if all the lights in the truck both terrified him and bothered his eyes. So this guy's in the hospital for 2 to 3 days, and the amnesia's persisting. His blood tests, however, showed they're like, he's clearly suffering from exhaustion. Something has happened to him. His blood tests come back, and his blood is mineral and vitamin rich. And Carl showed no signs of being hungry for almost 3 days. He didn't have an appetite. He didn't want to eat.
Oh my God, dude.
Perhaps the result of the strange pill that Carl had taken at the beginning of the encounter with Ausso 1. Now, you might ask, where are those other 2 pills? On his way back to the craft, he claims that Ausso took the pills back. So, conveniently, we don't have those other 2 pills. But the other strange thing that happens is his personal doctor x-rays him. And Carl had tuberculosis in the 1940s and had scars on his lungs.
I'm not right. Oh, dude.
Scars are gone. And the kidney stones that his doctor had currently been treating Carl for also gone from his body. They're looking at this guy, and one of the doctors was like, "This guy's fit for service. He's so healthy. He's like a young soldier." His internal, they said, other than his eyes being bloodshot and his shoulder having some cuts and bruises, and his head having some cuts from where he fell.
After all this.
Yeah, and from seeming to like the amnesia and mental exhaustion, his body was in perfect health. Healthier than it had been before this encounter. Carl didn't regain his memory until his daughter came to the hospital, a detail that Carl's wife Marjorie would later say almost seemed to be by design. Once he saw his daughter, it all started coming back, who he was, who his family was, and memories of this encounter with Ausso 1 start to trickle in, and he starts telling his wife and his family and the sheriff and the doctors what happened to him. He can't remember. Some of the details are hazy, but Carl's story immediately leaked from the hospital and found its way to the press, and he became kind of this overnight tabloid sensation. Scared that he had lost his mind, Carl underwent analysis, treatment, lie detector tests. Every doctor agreed that Carl was not only not insane, he seemed to be telling the truth, or at the very least, he was telling the truth as he saw it. Marjorie never doubted him. He underwent regression with a doctor named Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who's the best name ever.
Dr. Sprinkle.
He was the head of psychology at the University of Wyoming, and they did a number of sessions together, some of which you can actually see in an episode of In Search Of, hosted by Leonard Nimoy, which I will link in the show notes. And it was through these sessions that he started to really encounter all the minute details of his trip with Ausso 1. And Carl had come to the conclusion that Ausso and his race of strange entities came to Earth to hunt for food, game, fish. And Ausso 1 had told him during the adventure that, in fact, fish was an animal that did not exist on their homeworld, and it was one of their most favorite foods.
We love fish.
We love trout.
We love the salmon.
Yeah, and his thoughts were that their resources on their planet had been used up, and there had been pollution, and so they came to Earth to get stuff that they needed.
Wait, but what about the magic food pills?
Dude.
Well, they have those as well, but
But
not
they
everyone
love
wants.
fish.
Not
It's a
everyone wants to
supplement.
live. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
supplement. Not everybody wants to live on
Pills.
Yeah,
All right.
they're living on the
Wow.
pills when they're not. Listen, there's a reason why this is called high strangeness.
All right.
And perhaps it was because Carl had such a solid reputation as a foreman and woodsman. Most professionals found it very hard not to believe what Carl was telling them was true, as crazy as it sounded. So what had Ausso 1 wanted with Carl? Well, after undergoing regression sessions with Dr. Sprinkle, Carl can't help it. Carl decided that the aliens were involved in some type of breeding program. And Carl had undergone a vasectomy a couple years before this incident, and therefore...
The second pill is to forget we raped you.
And therefore, he would not have physically met the requirements of their mission and their needs.
Yeah.
Now, there's two loose ends to this thing. One,
That's all?
One is the truck. They finally, the cops got the truck out of the bog by making this weird system of like a ramp and cranes by just rolling logs out into the woods and finally getting it up and getting it out of the woods, because they couldn't even drive their trucks in to hitch this thing out of there.
Strange.
So they had to come up with this like weird makeshift way of getting the truck out of the woods. I'm sure they were cutting down trees and doing stuff. And then the other thing was the bullet. Carl still had the bullet.
Yeah.
What?
And there's a photo of the bullet right here.
Show me, dude.
He had this examined by experts, and
Yeah.
there's a great article about this whole story on Mysterious Universe, which I will link. But he had military experts. He had
That's wild.
he had artillery experts look at this thing and go, we've never seen a bullet casing look like this at all. You know, some of them said that it must have hit something very, very, very hard. But to do this, but we can't
My cone
imagine what it would be. And one of the things is they were like, if we had the slug, it would be great to see where the lead slug and examine that, but it was gone. But they were like, it literally looked like the casing had turned inside out.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating,
and they're
too.
always asking for physical evidence.
Like
There you go.
if you had pliers, that like you'd see the marks of where it was grabbed and manipulated.
Yeah, it was like this total. It was almost like it folded in upon itself.
This is the purpose of our cone hands.
Well, and the other thing, there's a couple
Super sick bullet catchers.
There's a couple things that I love about this story that.
There's a lot of things I love about this story.
But the first thing
love
is
this.
1974, when he describes that bullet going through invisible jello, that is straight up the special effect from Bullet Time in The Matrix, which was made in 1999.
Yeah. Didn't
And
think about that.
and it's like he's describing Bullet Time.
Yeah.
It made me think the Wachowskis must have read this story,
It's very possible.
and it must have inspired them for this. The other thing is the idea of aliens coming to Earth to hunt game. It predates the Predator. And so I'm like, they must have read this story. I mean, this
Only
must
the
have been an
Predator
influence.
wasn't interested in fish.
No, that's true. He made it much scarier. But neither, I mean, Ausso one and his friends weren't either.
Right.
You know, there's this great interview that I found on a podcast called The Supernatural Girls, where they interview, it's these two women who interview Carl and Marjorie, and Carl's still alive.
Wow,
He's old.
Oh, really?
Wow.
And he's older now, and he gets kind of choked up when he talks about this story. But they're a really kind of cool couple. It sounds like your great uncle or your grandfather telling. He's like, well, I guess they just, they didn't
Uncle
have
Carl,
much use
tell
for
him about
me.
the elk and the space cube.
Yeah,
Yeah, dude.
Well,
Uncle Carl,
all right,
The big
sit
Christmas
down.
gift.
but
Talk about the pill. The pill. Matrix. The pill.
I have to say this kind of the way they talk about it, you believe them.
Yeah.
And it's one of these fascinating cases where it combines some of the most credible down to earth people, some solid physical evidence that perplexed the community, that perplexed people who took a look at it, that never came up with any solid answers. I try to find stories that really debunk this. There's not really much out there. You're always going to have naysayers. But even Carl himself, he's like, well, people tend to think I'm crazy, but then I've had people interview me and they walk away believing my story.
Yeah.
And then it's coupled
Because he's not alone.
but it's
in
also
the
then
strangeness of these
coupled.
tales.
It's also coupled with some of the weirdest high strangeness stuff we've ever covered on the show. That's the story of Ausso 1.
I love it. Well
Dude.
done.
Had you ever heard this
That's
story?
amazing.
It was mentioned in the book that I'm reading now, Trojan Feast, Food Offerings of Aliens, Fairies,
There you
and
go.
Sasquatch, because there's a whole section on pills. And oftentimes entities are given pills. And you know what happens next? That's when they take them to outer space. And just like you said, these things satiate their abductees for around 3 to 4 days. So that would explain him not being hungry or,
Well, yeah, because if you're going to take someone
Insane.
back, they're going to get hungry, and you have to feed them.
Yeah, well, that's what this author, his
they
name
want-
is Joshua Crutchin. That's what he believed, that this sort of prepared your body for deep space travel or inner space travel.
Well, and they say time and time again in old fairy folklore, they say if you're taken by the fairy folk or the little people, you are often invited into a hall where there's a feast, and the fairies will offer you food. And they used to say in the old Celtic folklore, do not eat the food. Don't eat the food of the fairies, because if you do, you will not come back.
Right.
And so that kind of falls in line with what you're saying as well. It's fascinating. Marjorie and Carl joked that it's a good thing he had that vasectomy, otherwise he might have never come home.
Let me tell you something.
And
Dude,
Bryce, I know you're big on the 411 stuff.
I was just about to say, this reeks of all the parallels that I'm hearing about in these accounts of the missing 411 stuff. For instance, people vanishing in forests.
National park, too. This is like
parks,
a national forest.
The ones that they find are usually found like in strange places, miles and miles and miles away where they were taken and dropped. It looks like they're just dropped in some like unforeseen area that even like the best hikers and the best climbers couldn't get to. Not only that, the ones that they do find, luckily enough, the ones that are able to be found, they have an amnesiatic recall of the events. In other words, they don't recall what happened to them. They don't want to recall what happened to them, or they have a strange feeling about what happened to them. Not only that, sometimes, their clothes are turned inside out, like the bullet casing. Strange. There's so many, and so this isn't just something that just took place in 1975. These vanishings are happening in present day across the United States, Canada, and other places in the world. So, and it just like, I don't know, I'm starting to come up with like,
Here we go.
Are these really like, can I take it at face value now that this guy Ausso 1 is from another planet who just wanted to like take him out to deep space and perhaps start a breeding program? Or is this, or I just...
This to me feels very interdimensional.
Very interdimensional.
I feel like they were in another dimension,
Without
some
a
kind
doubt.
of interdimension.
No doubt about it. Where high strangeness rules the day.
It's like it's almost as if, Vinny, we could physically enter the dream world in like through a physical doorway, and then the place where this is just an allegory, but like as if the place where we go when we dream is an actual physical dimension,
almost,
and that someone like Ausso 1 is taking people into that realm, and it may look like space, and it may look like a planet, and it may very well be another planet, but it just the cube, the elk being frozen in time, all this
the
stuff.
Elk being frozen in time. It's like things come with you, like subjective parts of your hidden psyche. Like, for instance, those elk coming with him and riding in the spaceship. What's the purpose behind that? You know what I mean? That's like, it's just a part
Well, he
of
thought
that.
they were going to eat him.
Right,
He thought they were going to eat the elk.
Yeah, but they don't need to fucking eat elk. You know what I mean? Let alone 5. I just let in my mind when you tell that I had to like the elk
Yeah,
like
I
this up
totally
in like
see it,
in seats
too.
and like bucket race car seats, just like with the black eye.
Well, and it's also this strange. It also has this strange.
We are fun.
I also can't help but point out, just because we've covered him as well, that like the flying elk feel like flying reindeer. It's got this weird like magical Santa
dude.
kind of
This is
element
not-
to it.
this is
Vinny,
not-
we like to ask our guests, and I know we're running long.
No,
I
sure.
apologize.
That's all good.
What the hell was that? What's your
do you
takeaway
make
from
of
this?
this?
I mean, what you guys are describing to me, where my mental capacity is currently at, I'll phrase it in that way. And since this is the subject, this is the deal, this is the discussion, and for those who are listening, you're listening because you find this interesting, and if you're listening to this just to kibosh it, then like, what are you doing with your time, bro? Do something else.
No, keep listening.
But like, you bring up a good point, McMills. Because the folklore, when the fairies don't eat the food, folklore, you're talking about, so some of these ideas happen before the Matrix, and some of them are very, are direct parallels.
Even taking the pill is in the Matrix.
But that's the idea. It's like, Bryce, like how old are these stories, dude?
And, dude. Now
and
you're
it's still,
getting it, Vinny.
and it's happening. But the idea, like, it's still happening, and like it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't sound as far fetched, because when you're telling me the story as an awe and creepy and well done on the sound, Riley, it's awesome. It feels. My logical brain wants to say there's when you study something, when you go to a site and you take up fossils, you study them. You don't ruin them, you take care of them. When you're going to hunt, you shoot to kill and you eat. So you're describing that.
You're taking on the traits in a way of the thing that you're after, in a sense. Is that
what you're describing to me is that guy was that also one was an explorer, and he was there. He has certain protocol and how he does this,
right? And
he has an ability to communicate with us. So obviously, if our technology is inferior, which we kind of know, like, is it not? It's not a secret that we're. Like, the technology we have we're actually ahead. We're just not being
it's constantly in evolution. It's where we are, where we're at now. It's better than it was 100 years ago,
right?
But
And it's still moving forward. So it's like all these things that
are we?
Yeah, exactly. So is it really that far fetched? And that's what's kind of cool about it, is because and then you talk about the allegory of like our dreams, and is that the place? And Jim Quick talks about how one of the first things he does in the mornings, he talks about the billionaire, morning routine, is he writes down his dreams, because that's where he gets his ideas. But if you think of that for a second, where do your ideas come from? When we have now I'm going to go even further back, and I'm going like back into spiritualism for a second. So when you think of an idea, like if you're 5 years old, and they use this tool in movies and TV and storytelling all the time. The young kid draws something, and then you as the adult go, "Where did you learn that?" Mm-hmm. And they go, "Well, I saw it from here. I saw it from here. I saw it from here." And then
it's the shadow man that lives under my bed.
Exactly. But these, where did these ideas? Like, sure, if it's a shadow man, where did the kid get that idea from? Their imagination. Where did that come from? So I have this image. It's very simplistic because it's how it was taught to me, and it's something that I can see, and that it's just an idea or a way of thinking about things. But imagine, for instance, there are no new ideas, and there are only recycled ideas, and all your ideas are in a big invisible bowl above your head, and every once in a while you reach up and you don't know what you're going to grab, and you grab one and you look at it. But what if that bowl is actually stuff that's programmed, or it's a memory,
messages from another dimension,
or like there's another dimension that you're already living in. Where are they coming from, you guys? Like where do these thoughts come from? Where does imagination
all comes
come
back
from?
to the idea, the occult idea of magic, of like willing something that is unmanifested into the manifest.
Edgar Cayce talked about this. He called it the Akashic field, and everything that ever took place, everything that was taking place, and everything that was going to take place has already taken place. It's in the present moment.
Right.
Time is a man-made construct. And so he would just pull from the Akashic record, whatever people wanted to know about their future, or what if you wanted to learn something about the past, and he would pull from that, just like you were saying. It's like a collective unconscious that exists, and everybody has access to it. And, and you really just need to be able to tap into that source,
Well, and then back to like What the Bleep, where Joe Dispenza kind of what was known for. I remember something that really resonated with me, and now it's, I think, more prevalent because of our technology advancement since that documentary. Bluetooth,
right?
Airdropping, through space. We accept it. I know this sounds very rudimentary, like whatever, like it's radio waves, whatever. But dude, I mean, so what's the difference between that and like I was thinking about someone and they called me? I mean,
there's a pretty big difference.
No, but there might be an invisible field that connects us that we haven't discovered yet that allows interaction on that level as well.
Yeah.
It's a good example of there's systems
invisible
working
fields
all around us all the time that we can't, X-rays, infrared, Bluetooth, wireless. We can point to that. And I think on another level too, I always think about how like really texting is like not too many steps far off from telepathic communication. It's nonverbal communication that instantly is transcribed from one person to another over great distances. Now, it's not being done by the mind, but it's all internalized by the mind as well. It's all sent. I have a thought. I'm not talking out loud into this thing. I'm just texting. I have to use my body to do it, but I'm sending a thought to you and you're receiving it in instant time and sending it back to me. Yeah. It's not that far off from being able to sit across a great distance and telepathically communicate.
Well, it's the beginning of fusing your mind with a machine. It's like a step towards the singularity.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I love the idea of radio waves because that's what I was going to get at. Was like they're talking about like frequency, like when you turn a dial and like it's 106.1 KMEL. I listened to that as a kid. Anyone who's tuned to that dial can hear those people. So I remember in What the Bleep, what I thought was cool and the point I was trying to make, but that still seems kind of far-fetched and like unbelievable, is like if we're tuned into the same frequency, we can communicate on that frequency.
Right.
Yeah. And I think and so what frequency, whatever you want to call it, and sometimes when you meet, and I also kind of lump this into the same category of when you meet someone and you've never met them before, but why do you feel like you know them already? Or you immediately have
love
something
at first sight. Yeah.
Well, there's like love at first sight. There's were we brothers? Like I have a best friend, and I remember when we met, and he's very spiritual too. We've had this discussion many times, and we feel like it's as if we're family, and that we've already met, but now we're meeting again, and now it's a whole nother thing. And we haven't really broken it down or explained it, but it's like, and I've never had a brother. I have 3 older sisters. So, and when we do communicate, there's a level of knowing that seems odd for someone I've only known for so long and I've only talked to so many times. He's not Wikipediaing me, studying things and, all the information about me. I'm not studying all this information about him, but when we're in the same room or when we're around each other, there's something so familiar. And like, I can't explain that, but that's kind of where I lump it into.
That's how we felt when we met Riley and we started this podcast. Vinny, thank you so much, man. You've been such a great guest.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thank
awesome.
you. And when you are a rich billionaire superhero, I hope you'll let me come over and swim in your pool sometime.
Dude, you have an open invitation.
Thank
bro.
you very much. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at VRodriguezIII. I believe I am the same. My Twitter handle is the same, VRodriguezIII. My website is www.vrodriguezii.com. It is not up to date, so sorry about that. And I'm on Facebook. I got a fan page over there, and I'm currently filming season 2 of Insatiable. And whenever that comes out, y'all should check it out because it is gonna be a doozy. That's all I'm gonna say.
Awesome, great. We all look forward to it. Okay, guys, this wraps up another episode of Bigfoot Collectors Club. We want to thank all of our listeners. If you want more of the show, you can hop over to our Patreon page, The Other Side. Until next week, we remain confused, scared, terrestrial, all of the above. I like throwing a ball in the air and seeing if anyone will catch it. I guess it's all
hanging on your every word.
We're gonna find a good catchphrase one day. Until that day arrives, we'll see you soon.
Peace.
In a glass box with 5 elk. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks.
Wow. Bigfoot Collectors Club is produced by Riley Bray. Our theme song is Come Alone by Suneaters, courtesy of Lotuspool Records. If you like the show, please rate and review us on iTunes. It really helps get the podcast to more listeners. To support the show, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Bigfoot Collectors Club and unlock multiple reward episodes every month.